Everyone, welcome to another Monsido live webinar. The topic of today is the 5 rules to implement on your website for 2024. I often get asked from our very own customers, where do I start? What are some common rules to implement? How do I set up, automate, and enforce these rules? Well, the aim of today is to demystify all of this, but more importantly, understand what content rules are and why they are important for your organization. So as usual, some quick housekeeping, pretty standard stuff for anyone who's joined our webinars before or anyone that's ever really joined a webinar in general. So we encourage questions of all kinds. Please pop them in the Q&A panel and we'll take them at the end of the session. Please feel free to utilize the live transcription from Zoom. The recording will indeed have closed captioning. We'll also send the recording and slides within a week after this session. And of course, if we don't get to all of the questions today, we'll follow up afterwards via email. And now just a quick round of introductions. So I'll go first. Hi, my name is Clarence. I'm one of the customer success managers here at Monsido. In my day-to-day, I wrangle in the team to ensure that our customers see the most out of Monsido. Outside of this, I love climbing. I love being fit. I love, and I guess I got a background in front-end web development, and I love watching and growing my own personal projects and sharing my knowledge with others. If you are one of our other customers, you may have heard from some of our other team members, Raf and Ozair, and I think I'll throw it over to Ozair.
Hey everyone, my name is Ozair Zaman. I'm a customer success manager here at Monsido. Yeah, my day-to-day goal is really to empower our customers to meet their organization web content goal, right? And it could be from broken links or setting up an accessibility plan for an individual for the whole organization, right? But yeah, so that's really what's my day-to-day. And outside of that, I like to have a bit of fun on coding, and I do consider it fun, even though it can be pretty wild. And yeah, Clarence and I did some projects together on that too. And generally, I try to stay fit, but I'll be honest, hasn't been too consistent in summertime, right? Summer's coming, we're gonna hit it. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Raf.
Thank you, Oz. Yep, as you can see, my name is Raf, and my day-to-day is pretty similar to Oz, just regularly supporting and meeting with our customers, understanding their pain points and how we can better utilize and leverage Monsido in addressing existing issues that exist on their side. Unlike the other two, I don't code, I don't program, I don't have a background in development. I come from a health and patient care background, but that's okay. I still really enjoy all this web stuff, even though it still can seem like over the head, like goes over my head for quite a few things. Outside of Monsido, I'm a big fan of basketball, maybe a bit too much. I'm currently in an NBA fantasy league right now, but my team is not doing so well. Yeah.
Amazing. And so just for today's agenda, there's 3 key items that we want to discuss today. Why web content rules are valuable for your organization, 5 common types of rules to implement and how they can make a difference to your website and the impact of your organization and user experience of your website as well. How to implement and enforce these content rules, and of course, some question and answer time. But before we dive into the main content, I'd love to run a quick pulse check. So give me a couple seconds. I'm just going to launch this right now. So you should see it pop up on your screen. But yeah, the question for today is, does your organization have website guidelines? So there are a few responses here. Yes, we have guidelines and we enforce them. Yes, we do, but they are not followed. We do, but they are outdated. Or no, we do not have any content guidelines whatsoever. And so while we're kind of waiting for all of these responses to kind of funnel through, I just have a question to both you, Raf and Oz. So When speaking with your customers, what would you say is the most common policy or rule or content rule that you help set up, and why?
I'll take this one first. Yeah, it's a good question. Recently, actually, quite often what I see is as website content is being updated, changed, website redesigns, customers are often looking for old dead links. So this is a really common one. Hey, we're trying to find this old link. We don't want it on our page anymore. So, we help them set up policies and content rules around that. That's a really common one, actually. So that's, yeah, really goes with like new users, also, redesign and, updating content.
Yeah, for me, the ones that I see coming through quite a lot is customers reaching out to me. Could be something simple where they're asking me, "Hey, I'm trying to look for like a term or a key phrase because we need to update how we write this phrase." But one that's been asked like quite recently and quite a few times is they want to change their heading because they might have incorrect capitalization when it comes to their heading. They mentioned that they only want the first letter to have a capital in the heading or their title, but other words just be in lowercase. So we're just creating a policy and rule to set up so we can look for all headings with incorrect capitalization. That's one I see lately. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, I want to say I think this is, I guess, primarily more in the financial sector, but um, fees and rates continually change year on year for products, and content
Mm.
teams need to be on top of this each year. So yeah, you would need to make sure that you're creating these content rules, these policies, and automating them, and making sure that you are holding yourself and your team and your website accountable for updating these fees and rates. Also, separately to that, I guess this is more of an interesting one, is ESG references. We want to not use greenwashing terms. And be more mindful when writing about words like sustainability or green initiatives. So yeah, cool. So that concludes the poll. I'll just end the poll right now. And actually, you know what? The surprising thing is, yeah, you all have guidelines and enforce them. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, really good to see.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully we can still learn something out of this webinar. But I'll continue on. And this is going to go straight over to Ozair.
Hey, thanks, Clarence. Yeah, well, it's really good to see everyone's using and enforcing the rules. But yeah, so why are web content rules valuable for your organization, right? I would say, and I think you'd all agree because you're also on page with us. They're the cornerstone of every successful online presence, right? Like think about this: from the moment you think about a piece of content that's going to be on your page to the time when the user is actually consuming it, right? Your content rule helps guide it, make sure its quality is good, make sure it's meeting the purpose and intended goal of the content that you are providing for your users, and consistent, and make sure everything is good, right? I'll expand on this in a little moment, but let's go to the next slide. So what are some content rules, right? So that's really one of the questions, right? What are some content guidelines or content rules as they're called? I would say, website content rules are any rule that applies to a piece of content and help guide its quality, its actual value, and its consistency, right? So, as you can see from the slide here, we got some on-page rule for content. We got some brand consistency that can be for proper grammar, that can be for inappropriate or non-inclusive language. This is an interesting one because this can come from multiple sources, right? You may think, the content you are providing is not offensive, but if you close a look, a certain group may be offended by a certain phrase you use. So it's always great to set up a policy of like, known or, common words that may trigger a response or emotion. And that's a really good one. And there's also like industry regulations, right? Like if you have a regulation that you must follow. Like example, a lot of our financial clients cannot, state a guarantee of performance. So that's another, content rule that they provide. Make sure they're following industry rules, right? But yeah.
Yeah. And just to add on to the whole, the note where Jose was mentioning inappropriate and non-inclusive language, I've actually seen it with my own two eyes. I work with a lot of customers. I've seen it on websites where vulgar words, derogatory words, inappropriate language. And it's not necessarily the fault of the content author. Sometimes this content is being pulled in or rendered in from other applications, like say, like a reviews kind of panel, or
Yeah,
like a Twitter feed. So it's really important to even know that you might not necessarily, or even though you're quite confident that you don't have these things on your website, it's super important to just be mindful of it and have some tools, which we'll talk about in a moment's time, to kind of track these things and enforce these things off of your website.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so those are some of the rules that you might see, on page content rule, but you can also have some more complex types of rules that you may want or may not want on your content, right? So these are like images. You can set up a policy that makes sure you have, images that are quick to load. You're not slowing down your viewers. Regular expressions, these can be used to really filter out and select, specific content you do or don't want. This is an old classic lorem ipsum. We've seen some examples of this where live websites have carried through, and so this is another great policy setup, right? You have unsafe links, and and the content is outdated or too long. These are some of the ones that you can, more complex policies, and of course we can help you with any of these for application as well. But yeah, next slide. Back to the question of, why are these content rules, important to organizations? As you can see from the list here, there's a whole variety of different reasons and impacts that content rules can have for your content and your website, right? But I'd like to focus on three of them. I'll start off with consistency, right? And I'll give you a really good example of consistency. We had a client launching a campaign, and this was a campaign to bring in sort of new clients, and so they actually had a pretty good set of content rules. And as they were designing this and going to the QA, they were able to reach out and look at the past policy they've created along this content, and they were able to catch out some of the irregularities that was in some of the new pages. So it was like a really like automated system. Like I said, you take care of your content rule will take care of you, sort of thing, right? But yeah, another example, a bit different to consistency, is adaptability, right? And this really, where I see this most is, you have change of people coming through, new teams coming in, old team members leaving, right? And what we see from our end is when we do training and we, and a client has a good set of policies set up, when we teach them, how to regulate their content, they can refer to the policy and content rules, and they just hit the ground running, and they're right in with the the sort of aim and the goals of the client, right? And the other one is risk management. I think this is a really important one, right? And as Clarence mentioned before, you have offensive or really, offensive language that can really, offend your users. You have like, broken links and all that stuff. So risk mitigation, broken links is often overlooked of how much of a risk it, presents to a website. You can have unsafe links. As I said, like you can have links that share too much information, or key information that you must get your users. That might be a broken link, right? So that's really damage to your brand. So that's really, really important. So I honestly, but yeah, next slide, please. But here at Monsido, we like to merge this whole sort of content guideline into three categories, right? And that's brand guidelines, content guidelines, and style guidelines, right? So for brand guidelines, you're really thinking about misspelling of your brand name, key case sensitivity of the way it's written, outdated brand names is also really common, but we've had, requests, hey, look, we've changed the way we present ourselves and we want to remove these old terms. We get that a lot actually, right? And also copyright and intellectual property, right? And think about content guidelines. We're looking at, again, offensive or derogatory words, sensitivity when talking about age, gender, or disability, and making sure, as mentioned before in the previous making sure your intellectual property rights are actually adhered to, so that kind of thing. And finally, style guides, it's a wide range. This really encompasses all of your pages and website as a whole. But, some of the examples you look for are, consistent footer, maybe you have a consistent privacy statement, make sure it's updated on every page, terms and conditions, things like that. So you build some consistency, right? So these, some of the things that really content guidelines can impact and help you control in your web pages. But I'll gonna hand it over to Raf, and we'll break down some more on content policies. Raf, I think you're on mute.
Raf, you're on mute.
Yeah, I do it all the time, Raf. No worries. Welcome back.
Thank you. But thanks, Oz. I kind of just wanted to expand on what you were talking about and just kind of go over 5 common rules that we often see our customers incorporate into their website. And truth be told, they're quite simple, but they often have a bigger impact on like your website than you realize. So you can see how your visitors perceive and experience the site itself. So definitely incorporate these rules if possible when it comes to managing a site. So for the first one, it's really quite simply date formats. There are many different ways to format a date. Some of us use forward slashes, you can see over here as an example. Some use a dash or a dot between the days and months. So as we know, the order of these days, months, and years can change depending on the region. So it's important to have consistency in how we write this, just to eliminate any confusion. I've definitely been confused myself once, thinking that a product release date was a lot later than I actually thought it was. So it was actually a nice surprise, but definitely caused some confusion at the first part. So this is especially important if your site has a multi-international presence. For example, Apple, Amazon, Breville's, they all have websites for different regions. So you just want to make sure that how we format our dates is consistent for each specific region. So if we go to the next rule that we have, it is inclusive terms. So making your website inclusive goes just beyond making it accessible for those with a disability. This extends to even like the language that we're using when writing content for our site. Some typical ones, as Oz has mentioned earlier, was avoiding certain terms when we're writing about certain topics such as gender or age or disability. So for example, I would avoid writing about a disability that uses languages such as a person suffers from or they're afflicted with. This suggests that they're in constant pain or that the person with disability has a poor quality of life. Rather, um, rather than writing these things, you could maybe perhaps even change how you write about a specific disability. So if we're saying a, a person is restricted or confined to a wheelchair, a more inclusive way of writing that is a person who just uses a wheelchair. So definitely be mindful about how we're writing about specific topics. And in Monsido, as we can see, we do have some preset policies which can be edited if needed to flag inappropriate words when it comes to a specific topic. Okay, so if we move on to the third one, this is consistent branding, developing an on-brand website experience. So all pages on your website should be similar and indicate to the user that they're still on the same site. Consistency is reached by using design and ensuring that the different pages of a website are the same in terms of the color, the font size, the spacing, the logos, the headings, and so much that's involved with consistent branding. If your website is consistent, it oozes, professionalism, and it gives your clients something that they can be confident in when engaging with your domain. So this is how we can help again. We can use our policy module to search for brands without a trademark, your company name being misspelled, inconsistency in how your products are presented, maybe could be capitalization again. So definitely important to keep this front of mind when working on your website. The fourth one that we have is enforcing your style and writing guides. So a website should be easy to read for the most part. Using language that is too complicated is a quick way to lose readers who can be short on time or lack the knowledge to understand what's in front of them. So some tips for simplifying your writing is using language that is appropriate for your target audience. Maybe using short sentences that are easy to read and digest, eliminating jargon and complex language. As you can see, some examples that we have is we can see complex language such as acquire or additional. Rather, we can change it to a more plain language alternative. So instead of acquire, we can change it to buy or get. Instead of additional, more or extra. Or even just making sure how we write things are consistent for the different specific regions. So we have English, British, American, English, all have different ways of spelling certain words. For example, Americans would spell organization with a Z. I believe Australian British doesn't. So make sure you're on top of your style and writing guides to have that consistency, as I mentioned earlier. So the last one that we have is industry and regulatory compliance. So of course, each industry requires different compliance measures, but you want to make sure that whatever your compliance is, it is consistent across your entire site. So some pretty important ones which you can see that is any disclaimers. You might have terms and conditions, privacy policies. You want to make sure these are updated and consistent across all your pages. So if there are any changes to industry compliance, again, we can help create a rule for this so we can search for all instances of outdated disclaimers, registration numbers, regulatory guides, so we can update it to the latest version. So these are just some really five simple common rules to incorporate on your website. There's a lot more, but this is a good launching pad to keep in mind, at least for the start of next year.
Amazing. Thank you, Raf. So now I just want to talk about how we can actually implement and enforce these rules. And I just want to mention that, this may be given, but you really do want to nominate someone on your web team to champion these content rules. They need to have a clear understanding of why these rules are in place. And if not properly actioned or updated, they need to understand the impact of it. So training or education becomes a really important part of enforcing content rules. You might have just one content editor or author that is actively or proactively creating and updating and reviewing these rules. Or maybe perhaps you have a massive site and you might just want to nominate one person or even a team to manage the content rules for a specific directory that they are responsible for. So I speak to a whole heap of customers. Everyone kind of does it the same, but different. But yeah, essentially you do want to nominate someone to kind of take charge with setting up some policies or content rules and enforcing it on the website. So the next step to implementing and enforcing content rules is to, draft up a set of content rules and guidelines that dictate what is and is not allowed on your website. You might want to start by thinking about some common mistakes that your website editors make. For example, common misspellings using fancy or complex words like Raf mentioned. Then you might want to reference things like your own star manual if you already have that. Maybe you write content in a certain way. You might even want to reference the government star manual. I know here in Australia, we've got the Australian government star manual. Our customers pick apart that star manual and kind of create their own policies and rules based off that. And even any regulations that you might adhere to if you are involved or in a highly regulated sector. You might need to adhere to the Therapeutic Goods and Administrations regulations or the ASIC regulations. Also, speak to your own department, speak to other departments, your marketing teams, your product teams, your legal teams to get more insights here. So once you've documented all these rules and know why they're important for your organization and you've nominated a champion, you need mechanisms to enforce them effectively. So an automated tool, and this is a plug, an automated tool like the Monsido policy tool can help with this. So using our tool, you can set up a rule. We call them policies. So apologies if we've kind of used it interchangeably, but we call them policies. And when we scan your website each week, we will report on any violations. It is then up to you or your team or your champion to regularly check these each week, validate them, and update your site accordingly. So as I mentioned a little bit before, education, and a bit more education. Education should always be ongoing. You want to make sure that your web content editors are trained in the usage of your CMS. And of course, any potential updates to existing content rules or regulations and standards. As we all know, websites are living, breathing, evolving documents, and content changes all the time. And one example I often help customers is with, again, as I mentioned, updating fees. So fees in the finance sector frequently change. So you always need to be, I guess, up to date and educated and yeah, stay up to date with all of those changes. And so as content changes all the time, business objectives and goals change all the time too. And as just one example, it might be that your goal is to deliver a safe and secure website. And part of that might mean to not include unsafe links. So you might want to create and draft up a content rule to search for URLs that do not contain the security protocol by searching for HTTP, because those links should be updated to HTTPS. I see this all the time on websites, all the time. And maybe you want to search for third-party services like Dropbox links, Google Drive links. These are so suspicious and very, very unsafe. But yeah, it is also very important to hold your team accountable with any of this training and education. If pages or domains or subdomains are not found or are found to not adhere to any of the content rules that you've already defined, yeah, it's important to hold them accountable, educate them on why this is important, because these things can influence and negatively impact a wide array of metrics. And just a couple call outs here is, let's just say you've updated your phone number and it's not changed on some really important pages, then your conversion rates might decrease. Maybe you're using complex words on your websites. And it might induce some cognitive overload. And there are studies on this, and it will increase bounce rates on your website, and your statistics will definitely take a bit of a tumble there. And yeah, over to you, Raf.
Yeah, so the key takeaways of this is we just want to make sure that you consider these basic rules that we discussed when designing and working on your website, and just adapting accordingly to your preferences. Obviously, like, there's not one fixed for every single customer, for every single industry. So just by adapting, you just ensure that you're on your way to creating an effective and successful website that your visitors will enjoy, which definitely helps increase your retention. But while it's important to draw on these established rules, of course, there are certain situations in which you can break them. At the end of the day, you know your website and its purpose, and the purpose it needs to serve better than anyone. You know your target audience. If you know that your users prefer seeing many different elements at once, even though this could mean it's a busy design, go ahead. If you're using different color schemes on different pages, works for you, and more importantly, your visitors. Don't worry about like breaking web design rule. You need to adapt accordingly. So the principles that you can't stray away from are the ones that are truly central to the user experience. So this is again knowing your purpose, your audience, understanding your audience, and designing a website that's easy and enjoyable for all your visitors to navigate, right? So we'd actually love to help. And I think we're going to be launching another poll any second now. But yeah, we'd love to help. If you're interested, and you're not a current customer of us, we can do a free scan on your website. And once we get the results, we can take you through a 20-minute walkthrough of what Monsido has found. If you are a current customer, definitely feel free to reach out to us. More than happy to take a deep dive into our policy module or into any of the modules that we have in Monsido. So I think that's all we have. Was there actually anything else, also, Clarence?
We'll just wait for the poll to finish up. Actually seeing there are a few of you that would like to schedule a training. I can see
Yeah.
from the attendees list, I see some familiar names. So
Oh, I
yeah,
do too.
we'll be on the lookout. We'll be on the lookout for something from you. But I do also see a few of you as well. You're after some policy scanning too, or you want to see the Monsido policy tool. And I just want
Yeah.
to highlight here, and I don't mean to sound really cringy, but the Monsido policy tool is probably my favorite module in Monsido because really covers your behind. I'm not even joking. Like, if you want to search for anything, if you want to search for a keyword, if you want to find anything to update, the policy tool will help you with this. So I'm really glad that people want to see that demo. But I think that's enough time. I'll end the poll here for now. And I just want to, yeah, let's jump into Q&A. I'm not too sure if I'm just going to open up the chat here just to see if anyone's popped through. Don't be shy. If you've got any questions, or if you just want to say if you just want to say hi or how we're going, that's also good too. Feel free to pop in some questions in the chat or in the Q&A panel.
But also feel free to reach out to us individually as well if you have any particular question that's more, direct to your content. Yeah.
All sounds great. Yes. Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. And I'm not biased.
I actually agree with Clarence. It's actually one of my favorite tools as well. I think we're showing you a lot of things on our platform, right? The policy tool gives you, and it brings in the flexibility where, like you said, you have like each individual organization may have various different types of content rule, right? And you may have various different types of content as well. And yeah, the policy tool really adds a flexibility. So you can customize, your rules, your needs to the way you want. So yeah, definitely my favorite tool.
Cool.
Actually, I just kind of thought about this, but I kind of want to ask both of you, Oz and Clarence, is there actually any of like the rules that we discussed that you kind of struggle to adhere to a little bit?
That's a really good question.
Probably too.
I personally trouble adhering to. I would say It's a tough one. As long as you have a good set of rules, it sort of protects you from from yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you're working and you do something that's a little bit too creative. I'm going to say too creative, but your content policy will flag it. But generally, it's for me, it's actually the content. Like length of content is probably what as Clarence said. You want it concise. You want it as simple as possible. I think that's one of the most easiest one to break all the time.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I know a lot of our customers, we make reference to the Australian Government Style Manual, where you want to make your language a bit more simpler to read, to address the readability, because I think there was a study done by the ABC where 44% of Australian adults have a reading level between like 8 and 12. And so what our customers tend to do is they create this long laundry list of this long policy with a whole laundry list of words, of complex words, and then they run it on their website. And what they see is such a high number of hits, and they don't necessarily action it because they see like 10,000 hits. So how do you apply this? How do you adhere to this policy? So I guess my recommendation is to first shorten that list, and don't put too much thought into it. Like when you're reviewing each one of those pages that may potentially have those complex words, you just read the content, read that word in the context of what you're trying to say, and if it fits and you don't need to make any changes, just move on to the next page. Don't feel bogged down by such a long list of hits.
You actually just reminded me of a customer. I remember they mentioned to me like they had a readability audit on their site, and the feedback that they got was their authors. It feels like the authors are writing for themselves, rather than their target audience, because maybe these authors like they just came out of uni or something like that, and they have like a really nice way of writing, but they can't help but use really complex words and phrases, and they forget to like just simplify it as much as possible. Yeah,
very true. Because even though me and you, we understand what we write, we do neglect to write for a wider range of people. And so it goes back to that whole point of wanting to make our website more inclusive, because when we make our website more inclusive, we're not really alienating people. We want more traffic on our websites. We want more people to see content. We want more conversions. No, I'm just joking.
We do have a anonymous question. Do you want to take it, or I'm happy to take it?
I think you can take this one, Oz.
Sure. It says the question is, I wish Monsido was able to launch something that can detect spam bot or to the website traffic. Now, that is something interesting. We don't have that currently in the capacity of the website, because that really is a different end. We are more on the content side. This is more on the hosting and network side of things. But in that thought, we may have something coming up. Right, so that is it's a great question. Usually it's a straight no. It's a different angle. That detection is coming from a hosting side more than sort of a content management side, right? But yeah, we may have something on this, so that's it. I'll pin that thought. Yeah.
Cool. We've got a question. So the question is, when you have a distributed model of website editors out in the business, how do your clients share the Monsido findings with those people so they can see what needs to be fixed? Who wants to take this one? I can take it if no one wants to take it.
Sure, I'm happy to take it. So it depends on the way it's being distributed. I guess look, I would say like sharing in the style rules in Monsido is mainly done through our policy tool, right? That's the adherence. So whichever team is using the platform will have access to those policy rules, and you can apply that to particular content that you want. So you can create a rule and apply to a different set of your content. If you can create, like I said, just depends on the way you have set the representation of your content in Monsido, right? I guess that's if I'm understanding correctly, maybe that's if that's what you mean. Yeah.
And I
Feel free
think
to chime in.
I think to add on to that, honestly, don't think too much about it. I think the most important part is just to talk to yourself, like talk amongst yourselves. If you've got multiple hands dipping into the website, and we're not necessarily too sure who's doing what or who's responsible for which content rule, or if it is applied on one particular section of or folder or directory on the website, but not another. Yeah, you maybe have those conversations, have those meetings, have those stand-ups, or even, and I guess this is kind of like a niche thing in Monsido, is yeah, I mean, I guess for all of our Monsido customers is a way to filter that. So you can specify a user to be to kind of be responsible for a certain subset of pages on the website, and then they can monitor all the relevant policies for that. So yeah, I kind of hope that answers the question, Vicky.
But I think like we can also attach labels to different pages and different checks, right? We can customize that label for particular team members or users, or customize it so we have priority level for them, like fix this one now. You can attach a label to like put this on the back burner for now. So there's a lot of different ways we can kind of like filter out like which checks, which pages can be assigned to different people. As Clarence said, domain groups, creating a subsection of pages, definitely really useful also. But I think there's multiple ways to go about this. Just seeing which one really like works out for you.
Yeah, Vicky, this is a great topic to discuss over a meeting, actually. So we can see the way you've done it, and maybe tailor, suggestions to your current, structure.
All right. Well, I guess that's kind of all for now. It doesn't look like we're getting any more questions in the chat as well as in the question and answer field. I get it. End of the year, it's all good. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up here. I just wanted to say on behalf of the customer success team here at Monsido, APAC region specifically, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Having a look at the 5 or I guess 5 categories or most important categories to implement or rules to implement on your website. If you are an existing customer with us, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are more than happy to assist, whether that's in the form of an email, setting up a time with us, or even hitting us up on that little chat support widget that we've got in our application. But yeah, if you want to find out more, we'll be reaching out to you within the coming weeks. So thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
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 Good one.